mankind has always been fascinated by the subject of the incubation of the egg. Out of the egg, which begins life as a watery liquid, yolk and white, slowly develops into, almost unaided, into a live chicken. And it has to be nourished in the sense to be warmed, heated in the process of developing. So we have much to learn from the symbol of the egg being embraced by the serpent, which is obviously warming it and bringing to birth something separate from itself. And indeed what is being brought to birth here is a high being which has ensouled the 7 globes of a particular scheme. But we have to go further than that and look at occult chemistry. And occult chemistry is based on the proposition of certain lines of force that seem to be more or less electrical, that there is a central basic flow of force, and thereafter there are coils of force wrapped about it. And that is seen here in the serpent and the egg. The book is indicating for you the growth of human consciousness in terms of the root races of mankind. At the moment, we are in the 4th round, and by 4th round we mean the 4th circuiting of the round of globes that make up an Earth scheme. We're in the process of the 4th round. In the 4th round, there are 7 root races, starting from the bottom here, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're in the 4th round of in the 4th root race of the 4th round. And so there's a double 4 there. By this we mean that the first life wave encompassing the egg of humanity is on the first ray of will and power, and is favored by fire, and favored by will and atma and power. Then the round of humanity goes into its 2nd phase. But in the first round there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 subraces. And so the first root race on the Earth has 7 subraces. Then in the 2nd root race there are 7 subraces. And in the 3rd race there are 7 subraces. And about here there is the process of individualization. A foreign, an extra systemic structure adds its energy, warming the human consciousness egg up again and stimulating it. This is where we are today. And we can say then that we have had a first root race. We have had a first root race manifesting, and then a second one manifesting. And notice how I'm ringing ring each subrace around the coil of the snake. The coil of the snake represents a round, and the small orange sections around it a subrace. I'm sorry, I've gone wrong there. I have to cut that back again. Just leave it. Each round of the snake represents a root race. So fourth root race, third, second, and first root race. But with each root race, the root race is divided into 7 subraces. And we're in the fourth root race, and in the fourth root race, we are in the process of putting together the 5th subrace of the fourth root race. We have had the 4th subrace, and the 5th subrace is called the Anglo-Saxon subrace. I'm merely pointing this out to you to show you that the apparent symbol of the egg and the snake has a deeper meaning to it, and that it represents humanity's egg being warmed by the different subraces, 7 subraces to a root race. And we're in the 4th root race, 5th subrace of the 4th root race. So that is interesting. Now I want to go back to my theme about paralleling globes, paralleling globes. In recent years, in my last 10 or 15 years, I have had experiences which have been inexplicable in terms of current ordinary theosophy, and certainly totally inexplicable in terms of science. And as I have said here before, one of the experiences was to meet in a world that was as real as this one, but not the astral world, to meet a friend of mine who had been a monitor of mine, a mentor of mine, I should say, when I was at Natal University, Professor Snedden. I met her in a world of, I can't say they were super beings, but I met them in a world whose note was one of intellectuality. And we spoke for a while, and she said certain things, and I replied, and I was aware that it was a world totally devoid of any kind of emotion. Sincerity, yes. Conviviality, yes. But no emotion involved in it. And all right, I put that at the back of my mind and met her once or twice in that world, Professor Elizabeth Snedden, who is now 94. And in Durban in her last years. But what contradicted this, more or less, was that I had also an experience on 2 occasions of a dead brother. My brother died of cancer 4 or 5 years ago, and I was expecting to meet him in the astral world, and indeed had an astral experience involving him, in which he was able to show to me the injuries that he had received in having to go through chemotherapy for his cancer treatment. I have written about that elsewhere. But it was another 1.5 or 2 years after that that I met him in the same world. And in this world, it was my brother There was no arguments about it. He wasn't half asleep or an astral figure or something like that. He was my brother, dressed as I would expect my brother to do, speaking as I expected him to do, addressing me in terms that were known to me, that I had been brought up with. And when I came out of these experiences with him, I began to realize there was some other explanation for afterlife. It wasn't the kind of Devachan that is taught by Buddhists. It wasn't full of cherubims and angelic inferences and so on. It was a straightforward experience, as if I had walked out of one room into another and there met my dead brother of 3 or 4 years. And it shocked me. And I realize now that for those who are able to reach a level of intellectual expression and have a history of intellectual factors, that there is a place that they go to, which, if you like, is the higher part of the antakarana. If you have put together an antakarana, if you have access to higher manas, therefore, then it may well be that when you are in sleep unconscious, where there is no consciousness at all, you are totally inert in the sleep state, whereas the ancients used to say there is no need for symbol and image because you are totally conscious, that you go into a parallel globe where this earth is represented almost exactly, and where certain individuals are able to reach when they are sound asleep. No REMs, no rapid eye movements or anything like that. Sound asleep. And I believe that that is so today. I've therefore had to change my attitudes and beliefs in many things. But I'm grateful for having lived long enough to find that what was suspected is now scientifically approved. There's opprobrium for it, that there is a parallel world to this one. What might it be comprised of? Of course, having been through the halls of science, I've considered this. If it's going to be anything, it is probably a silicon world. Silicon is the closest to sand. Sand is made out of silicon. Glass is made out of silicon. We have large numbers of quartz crystal, which is silicon. And I believe that the constant impressions coming from the Earth to its parallel globe have found some imprinting on a different medium, as silicon is to carbon. We are carbon people. We are built out of carbon. But carbon and silicon are close together. They are both tetrahedrons. They find similar positions in Leadbeater's, C.W. Leadbeater's occult chemistry. We all know what silicon breasts are. We've seen silicon there. We've seen silicon figures portrayed in in video shows about the future and other planets and extra-systemic beings and ETs, and we see a silicon-like figure materialize. I believe that silicon could be one of the materials which enables a parallel globe to the Earth to be materialized progressively with as much intent and will and sanity and drive as we have. I do not think that the astral part of us is able to participate in that transfer. That there is an astral world, no doubt. That there is a limiting factor to the astral world that stops light and feeling combined together going further. I always quote Thermopylae because of the tremendous emotion, 400 men sacrificing themselves for their country before the oncoming Persians, and what it must have been like, and how this strong emotion and this vivid experience, historic experience, combined together is extravasated into the astral world, where it meets a boundary and forms the memory of mankind, certainly the emotional, painful memory of mankind. But what I'm talking about now is a parallel globe in which we find ourselves during the dense sleep state, if we are mental enough to project ourselves to it. And we have been developing there mentally as we have on the earth. It is exact, graphic, and vivid, but it is not charged with a kind of emotional energies that you get in an out-of-body experience in the astral world. And that world is there. And I believe that between lives we continue to inhabit it. And that from that world, that parallel globe, our next incarnation is directed. And there is an interplay between the two. And so if you ask me to state more methodically what I've been talking about tonight, I would say that these are not only parallel universes, but they are reciprocating universes. They reciprocate what is projected by you in the medium of light at 187,000 miles a second, going to outwards and reaching that globe. What you are projecting out to it will be reciprocated back to you, even if it's under the law of non-locality in what we call quantum physics. Now I want to read to you, some of you will be aware of it, but it's part of the dream factor. There are many famous dreams which have been described. I think that the priestly one describing the ringing of birds on God's hill and his subsequent dream about the life force in birds is very important. I don't think that the parallel globe or universe is confined to humanity. I believe that it may be responsible for directing some of the instinctual forces that underlie the species of the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom. And it may well be that in his dream vision that he had, he was in contact with the reciprocating force coming from a parallel globe that inspires the bird species to develop and to grow and to die. This is what Priestley had to say. I dreamt I was standing at the top of a very high tower alone, looking down upon myriads of birds, all flying in one direction. Every kind of bird was there, all the birds in the world. It was a noble sight, this vast aerial river of birds. But now, in some mysterious fashion, the gear was changed and time speeded up, so that I saw generations of birds, watched them break their shells, flutter into life, weaken, falter, and die. Wings grew only to crumble. Bodies were sleek, and then in a flash bled and shriveled, and death struck everywhere and at every second. What was the use of all this blind struggle towards life, this eager trying of wings, all this gigantic, meaningless biological effort? As I stared down, seeming to see every creature's ignoble little history, almost at a glance, I felt sick at heart. It would be better if not one of them, not one of us at all, had been born, if the struggle ceased forever. I stood on my tower, still alone, desperately unhappy. But now the gear was changed again, and time went faster still, and it was rushing by at such a rate that the birds could not show any movement, but were like an enormous plane sown with feathers. But along this plane, flickering through the bodies themselves, there now passed a sort of white flame, trembling, dancing, then hurrying on. As soon as I saw it, I knew this flame was life itself, the very quintessence of being. And then it came to me in a rocket burst of ecstasy. A rocket burst of ecstasy that nothing mattered, nothing at all ever mattered, because nothing else was real but this quavering, hurrying lambency of being. Birds, men, or creatures not yet shaped and colored, all were of no account except so far as this flame of life traveled through them. It left nothing to mourn over behind it. What I had thought of as tragedy was mere emptiness of a shadow show, for now all real feeling was caught and purified and danced on ecstatically with the white flame of life. I had never felt before such deep happiness as I knew at the end of my dream of the tower and the birds. I'm happy to say that we have a copy of this to hand out to you. Would you like to hand it out now? As I interpret it, there was an interaction between a parallel globe and our Earth. And that interaction could easily have been with any species, and especially from our point of view, the human species. And somehow or the other, J.B. Priestley was caught up in this stream as part of his dream, in which he saw the interaction between the parallel system and the system of birds on the Earth, and that this was the basis for their instinctual growth of ebbing and flowing with the force of life darting through them. What I have tried to depict here again and again is that there is something worthwhile in the dream life. you will find there are those that sneer at it, who laugh at it, and quote the great dreamers of the world. But dreams have also had a powerful influence in politics, in art, and in science. You remember I told you about scientists who had been affected by dreams. Kekule, who was given the structure of the benzene molecule in a dream. 6 carbon atoms rotating around a central factor and vibrating. And I talked about the man who invented the sewing machine and how in a dream he was told to put the hole of the needle in the point rather than at the rear of the needle or the top of the needle, and so on. I want to read another thing, Joe, if I can just cut off now for a moment. I was looking at my poetry books that I took to Durban High School when I was 12, 13. And on the back of the book, the poetry book I was investigating, there was a statement by me in which I showed that the poem, The Poets as Dreamers, was my favorite poem at school. And it's funny that through my life I have often quoted this particular work. This is a description of poets, but it's meant to be of dreamers. The dream life of the poet has often produced great changes in the world. The Poets by Arthur O'Shaughnessy. We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams, wandering by lone sea breakers and sitting by desolate streams. We're world losers and world forsakers, on whom the pale moon gleams. Yet we are the movers and shakers of the world forever, it seems. With wonderful deathless ditties, we build up the world's great cities, and out of a fabulous story, we fashion an empire's glory. One man with a dream at pleasure shall go forth and conquer a crown, and 3 with a new song's measure can trample an empire down. We, in the ages lying in the buried past of the earth, built Nineveh with our sighing, and Babel itself with our mirth, and o'erthrew them with prophesying to the old of the new world's worth. For each age is a dream that is dying, or one that is coming to birth. A wonderful poem. I visit Italy, Europe, frequently and talk to groups there. And when I first went over there, I talked about Anglo-American influences and was received in that respect very coldly. But recently, I'm talking about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was in Italy and had the audacity to talk about the Anglo-Saxonification of Europe, which lies ahead. And they loved it. The Italians loved it. There's a change there of thinking, and I really do believe that this time that the power of the English language and the Anglo-Saxons combined will bring about an Anglo-Saxonification of Europe, which will bring peace and stability thereafter. Dreams. Dreams fascinated poets, of course, and especially Shelley. And he wrote a poem, which I'm going to quote, it's very short, a poem which tells how poets themselves can synchronize their breathing with their image forming, and how the images that they form are given life by their breathing. It's an extraordinary poem and well worth writing out in your spiritual diaries. It's called Song of a Spirit of the Mind in Prometheus Unbound. Prometheus, of course, was a human hero. Prometheus stole fire from the gods, and we mean spiritual fire from the gods. And from the gods are on that parallel universe. The gods are on the parallel universe, and bringing fire from that parallel universe to the earth is bringing spiritual fire. The fire of individualization, the fire which, well, certainly motivates me anyway. Song of a Spirit of the Mind and Prometheus Unbound. The French poets used to love to sit near rivers and watch the strong sun in summer dappling on the water. And they used to say that if there was the scent of rotting apples around, and the apple trees would be rotting about this time, the apples would be falling to the floor and rotting, that the effect of the rotting apples had a psychedelic effect on them. And the result was that lying there in their afternoon nap, they would be dazzled by the flicker of light on the river, and at the same time smelling with their breathing in the stench of the rotting apples gave them psychedelic experiences. Well, I wasn't told that at school, of course, but I've had to unravel it, but it's come out of the same school book. It goes, on a poet's lips I slept, dreaming like a love adept. In the sound his breathing kept. Nor seeks nor finds he mortal blisses, but feeds on the aerial kisses of shapes that haunt thought's wildernesses. He will watch from dawn to gloom, the lake-reflected sun illume, the yellow bees and the ivy bloom. Nor heed nor see what things they be, but from these create he can forms more real than living man, nurslings of immortality. P.B. Shelley. Nurslings of immortality. The transfer from meditative states, or wherever you are, meditative states, prayers, I suppose, but prayers are too mixed with emotion, but mental experiences aligned with breathing almost certainly give you some sort of link or anchorage with the parallel globe where your immortality is assured. What? Oh, questions? Yes, dear.
Well, actually, two questions.
One at a time, please.
Yes. You mentioned earlier that science has proved parallel worlds.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that, please? Science has proved.
Science has proved. Well, anticipating such questions, Scientific American, which is partly sponsored by the state, I understand, describes parallel universes in detail. You will find it in New Scientist in one of the issues in the last month, Parallel Universes. And
This is Scientific American, which edition?
well, I'm going to leave it here for you.
Okay.
And you're welcome to look at it. And also,
New Scientist.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago in New Scientist, I think there was.
yes, in the last month there have been issues. New Scientist is once a week. And here you have In Focus. I'll leave the magazines here so that you can look at them afterwards. And it's full of parallel universes.
One more question. Unfortunately, I missed your first lecture, and perhaps you dealt with it in the first lecture. But I'm not aware of the fact that you have dealt with the phenomena of nightmares in dreaming. And I would really be interested to know your...
I'll do a thing on nightmares, Joe. Very quick. Give me 2 minutes to set up. You have asked a question about the nature of nightmares. Well, nightmares, of course, are even less explicable than ordinary dreams because they suggest pathology. But I'm going to give you an experience that I had of nightmares in a family that I knew in Cape Town. The family had boy twins, and the boy twins grew up very differently from each other. When they were in young manhood, the one brother was a very mental type and was a successful businessman in the printing inks industry. His brother, twin brother, was a very sensitive person and completely opposite in personality and behavior, very inward turning, and seemed to be possessed of some difficulty which surfaced as nightmare experiences. The phenomenon was that in the middle of the night, these twins, sleeping in the same room, that these twins had a difficulty. The second one, who was called, just coming through, Stanley, the second twin, Stanley, the sensitive one, would wake up unexpectedly, unpredictably in the middle of the night, scream, jump out of bed, and rush for the door or the window in a frantic bid to escape. So used to this experience had his brother, twin brother, whom I remembered as Elf. So used to it was he that in his sleep state almost, he would leap out of bed and grab his brother in a rugby tackle and hold him down until he stopped writhing and shouting and had got over his fright, as it were. And during this time, the mother or the father would come in and pacify and so on. But the older boy, Alf, had adapted himself, and so it was just understood that during the night, Stan would wake up, make this extraordinary bolting for freedom, as it were, and his brother would have to grab him and pull him down otherwise he would be out in the street. I was asked to investigate this. And I took a history, naturally, from each of the two boys, who were, 18, 19. And then I began to talk to the mother. And at that time I had sometimes gone to the races, Kenilworth Racecourse, and had seen the mother on the racecourse. And it turned out that she had become involved in severe losses betting on horses on the racecourse. And she had been threatened by racecourse men, bookies, agents, who had cornered her and demanded money from time to time. And apparently Stan, her one twin son, had been present. And ever since that time, she wasn't aware of this in the sense that she knew it and suppressed it. She just hadn't connected the two. But from that time, the boy had been terrified to such an extent that whenever he, I suppose, had a dream of the race course and his mother, that this is what would happen, and it would trigger this frantic experience of, which was unpleasant, and later was to cause further complications. That's all I can tell you about them. But there is some fairly straightforward nightmare references that you could get hold of. And I've given it in my series on esoteric healing. And so if you write to us and you say what it is you want, Joe might be able to find it on the esoteric healing files like this one. And it would be in greater detail.
And also there's a very good reference in alcoholism.
Is there? Oh, yes, yes. I may as well explain that. Have we time? In my investigation of alcoholism, and there are always enough people around you to do investigations, especially if you can reach them astrally. If you can come out of the body and visit them astrally, you can observe what conditions astrally are surrounding them. And on this particular occasion, I had projected myself to somebody who was suffering from terrible nightmares, and it turned out that he was almost as exactly described by C.W. Leadbeater, in that he was a person that occasionally got drunk and would sink into an alcoholic coma. And then in recovering from this, he would have terrible experiences. And I found that when he was in coma, he was attacked by alcoholics in their astral bodies. Dead alcoholics, certainly, but possibly alcoholics alive. But the dead alcoholics would tear at the liver region where he was metabolizing the alcohol and in coma as the result of the blood content of it. And so that was the nearest that they could get to alcohol imbibation through this particular person. It was a terrible thing to see. And it would leave him, he wouldn't remember much of it. It was just the usual nightmarish observations. But it would leave him weakened for days afterwards, after he'd been in coma and attacked by these astral beings. So that is a more direct answer to your problem, your question. I think I'm going to have to come over here.
Two questions. The first is getting back to the example you made that whilst in a dream state you spoke to your brother and he was real. How long does this mantle of identity from this life stay on? Because
In this particular
reincarnation, then wouldn't he have moved on, or would it have been somebody else? Because obviously he would have had different lives. So how does it work?
the question that you want me to repeat the question or not?
Fine.
The question asked in relation to my own brother, whom I met in the parallel globe. The question asked was, how long did this experience last, and did it repeat itself?
No. How long?
Come on, you must handle this. I can't
so
hear
sorry.
it properly.
Okay. In this dream state, you met your brother.
Yeah.
He was as you knew him in this life.
Yeah.
Right. How long does a soul keep that?
You mean, is he still there now?
In this identity, because if we believe in reincarnation, we believe that we have been different people. Therefore,
Now, hang on.
how long?
Mustn't put words in my mouth.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I don't understand.
No, the general teaching on reincarnation has been, until the world population has been that you spend about 1,000 years out of incarnation.
In between.
Yes.
Okay, that explains.
And it depends on whether you have a soul on the ray of love wisdom, or whether you have a soul on a will ray. If it's a will ray, then it's usually 700 or 800 years. If it's a love wisdom ray, then it's 1,200 years,
In between.
roughly 1,000.
In between each incarnation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Then that would explain it, because I got very
Oh,
confused.
okay.
The second question, I have
Oh.
two questions. And I would like your confirmation whether this is correct. Is consciousness in the physical world manifested as an electromagnetic vibration, a DNA helix of an electromagnetic vibration? Can it be described like that?
The best that I can do to that is to say that when you are conscious, there is brain activity. When there is brain activity, it gives off a wave, and you can, with an electroencephalogram, measure the kind of consciousness that the subject is experiencing, depending on the nature of their 4 brain waves: alpha rhythm, beta rhythm, theta rhythm, and so on.
But is each individual consciousness, would it be then the vibration be as different to each individual as their own biological DNA, but in a vibrational equivalent?
If you are awake, it would tend to show one kind of brainwave. If you are asleep and unconscious, it'll show another kind. If you are asleep and dreaming with eye movement, it'll show a third one. The fourth one, I've forgotten. You must go into it. You mustn't go rambling down pathways on your own unless you can write them down. And the spiritual diary makes you write things down. I've got a guy that from the moment he reaches me, and talks, and I say, hang on, you must write this down. It's no good just going off at tangents and going on and on and on. That is the worst thing for you. But when you deal with consciousness, you've got to understand humanity does not know what produces consciousness. That's a scientific fact. Does not know. Theories, ideas, certainly. But once you are conscious and the brain is working, they can tell you what the brain is doing. There are modifications of this in that you can be awake, conscious, and you can go into meditation and slip from beta rhythm into alpha rhythm. And then your thoughts slow the brain waves down and flatten them. And in practice, we say that the brain can be virtually put to sleep. And in the sleep state opens a space between thoughts. Thoughts slow, stop. And in the space between when they start again, there's a space. And it's then that the higher self can come in and engulf you. But so long as you are encircled with a flow of 1,200 thoughts a day, the higher self can't reach you.
But if everything is vibration, then wouldn't consciousness, to identify the individual...
You see, you're struggling with words. You must equip yourself.
But as we have a biological DNA, would we not also have a vibrational DNA? Complicated, but...
We think so. They're measuring cells now, and all cells have a vibration of some sort. But that's brand new, and they haven't got it down in writing yet. Mm-hmm. What you're really hinting at is an aura. Have you got an auric vibration? So that when you meet somebody, you say, yeah, I can get on with that person. I talk her language. She's fine. But on the other hand, you can meet a person and say, oh, I can't deal with that. It's impossible. You know what I mean. And we are all auric feelers. We can feel auras. Can't always see them. You can rarely see them because usually you're looking for something very colorful, whereas the aura is not in color. It gives off, well, other things, another subject, another day. So there we are. One more question. Oh, 5 minutes, yes. One more.
How would you describe sleepwalking?
How would you describe sleepwalking?
I got that, but in terms of what?
Well, sleepwalking, I believe you are in a dreamlike state, are you not?
I mean, can you quote me? Shall we talk about Lady Macbeth?
No.
Well, Lady Macbeth is sleepwalking. And she's sleepwalking because she has a profound guilt. She has organized the death of the King of Scotland, and she has created bloody circumstances all around her. And when she goes to sleep, something activates her and makes her seek some sort of redemption. The next moment she's washing her hands all the time because she's got blood on her hands. And so the suggestion of sleepwalking is that A, you have to be that type of person, to be a somnambulist, as it were. And secondly, it can come to the surface when you have this tremendous guilt that goes on, even though you've closed your eyes and gone to sleep. The guilt is there. It's affecting your dreams. It's affecting your waking. It's affecting your hypnagogia and your hypnopompia. You know what those are? Yes, you do. No. See, that's why we have to do these things. There's you. Let's say that it's you seated in meditation. And there's your sleep state. There's your sleep state. And this is your waking state. 1,200 thoughts a day. Here they are. And round about the time you fall asleep, there's a sensitive state. And when you're waking up, there's a sensitive state. And this is called hypnagogia. And that's called hypnopompia. And that's a person's consciousness. What I've suggested to you here tonight is that you can stop the thinking in meditation. You can stop the thoughts, or you can slow them down and stop them. And you create a space before they start again. And in the space between thoughts, the higher self can reach you. That's what meditation's all about. And don't you accept anything else than that, because you know they're cheating you. Two minutes, yes. Oh, you want to?
You mentioned earlier about using astrology to find the soul purpose. Could you expand on that?
You'll
Did
have
you
to
say
buy
the rising?
have to buy some of my books, I'm afraid. Yes, dear.
Do sleeping pills,
The what?
do sleeping pills block out dreaming? Or do they enhance dreaming?
Oh dear, take the damn things if you're in pain.
No, it has nothing to do with me. I'm not taking
You know, our race, our fifth root race, has earned karmically the right to treat itself against pain. We've created so much good in our laboratories with regard to medicine and surgery. We now have the right to treat ourselves against pain instead of bloody suffering it. I rarely take painkillers or sleeping tablets because I don't need them. But if I have to come here to the Theosophical Society or go somewhere and talk, and it's a prearranged time and so on, they expect me. And if they expect me, then I'm prepared to take painkillers so that I can do it. And if I can't take the painkillers, then I can't do the lecture. And so you have to balance it's changed now. Take them.
This is not a personal question. I just thought of that.
I think it's much better to take painkillers and sleep tablets than it is to take psychedelic things.
But do you still dream when you take sleeping pills?
Can you create dreams with sleeping tablets?
That's what my question was.
I'll answer that question next time, and that is how to put things to your higher self, your higher consciousness, so that you get the feedback that you want. What is my soul's purpose? What is this? What is that? How can I deal with my mother or my sister and so on? Not one of you has put a horoscope in. Joe says, cut it quick. But if you have a